I killed my best friend when I was 11, and I've regretted it every Halloween since. By Janiebegood. I was 11 when I killed my best friend. It wasn't on purpose, of course, and I've felt bad about it for a long time. I still do, particularly around this time of year. I've taken to becoming effectively the world's most functional alcoholic during the entire month of October. I drown my autumnal anxieties in cheap vodka that burns its way down my throat. You could probably call it a tradition now. Melanie Graham was a bright, happy kid. She had skipped at least one grade and was at the very top of the class. She had been accepted into every private high school she'd applied to, and a couple of them gave her a scholarship. No idea why a kid like that would want to hang around a kid like me. I was failing at least one of my classes every semester and had visited detention enough times that I had a favourite desk. She always tutored me to at least above passing and waited until detention was over to walk home with me. Mel and I both loved the fall. It was a welcome break from the sweltering southern summer. On October 1st, we had a tradition where we'd decorate a treehouse her dad built us a few yards into the woods behind their house using old decorations our neighbours didn't want anymore. I'm sure it looked like the Halloween section in the hardware store threw up on a tree, but we couldn't think of any place more beautiful to spend our evenings and weekends. And it was every evening and weekend. It got to a point where my worry-wart of a mum even stopped calling Mel's house to remind me to be home before the streetlights came on, which wasn't hard as Mel had helped me plan out the most efficient path to and from her house. I biked to Mel's house a few blocks over in the morning, left my bike there, and then walked with Mel to school. She didn't have a bike and hated sitting on the handlebars, so it took a little longer than just riding over, but that was a compromise I'd readily made. In the evenings, I'd just keep an eye on the sunset. Eventually, I had the timing nailed down, so a couple of times I waltzed through my front door just as the streetlights started glowing. The Monday before Halloween, Mel was waiting at the end of her driveway for me. Her nose was red and stuffy. I knew she had spent the night crying. "I can't come to school today," she said. "Why not? You sick?" I asked. "No, my Auntie Ginger, the one down in New Orleans, she, was all she got out before she broke down into sobs. I remembered Auntie Ginger. She was the weird aunt, the one that left every conversation with the other participant wondering how much acid she took in the 70s. That aunt. Mel was crazy about her though. Mel loved her weird aunt and had a little shelf dedicated to all of the weird things she had given Mel on her visits. "Is she dead?" I blurted. "No, but she's real sick," she said as she wiped her tears away. "We're flying down today to see her, so I won't be at school." "Well, how long will you be gone?" "Dad says probably a week. We'll come back on Sunday though, even if Aunt Ginger doesn't, you know. He doesn't want me and the twins to miss too much school." The twins were her brothers, Michael and Martin. They were in kindergarten. "So you're going to miss Halloween?" I said. I tried to hide my hurt. Halloween that year was on a Saturday, which meant extra time to finish our costumes and staying up as late as we wanted. "I guess so. I'm sorry," she said. When I didn't respond, she said, "Can you get the assignments from Mrs. Key for me?" "Sure," I said, dejected, and left her without even saying goodbye. I've never handled disappointment well, and while I understood why she had to go, I didn't want to spend my favourite holiday alone, especially since we had spent weeks planning the day down to the quarter hour. That week went by very, very slowly. I'd never had to go to school alone before. We spent so much time together that when one of us got sick, the other caught it too, so we'd both stayed home from school. I had no one to eat with at lunch or hang out with at recess. Sure, there were other kids, but I felt on the periphery. I was lonely. The only class that I bothered to pay attention to was science. We were doing a chapter on butterflies all week. The teacher even brought in a bunch of dead ones that were pinned to a piece of styrofoam. On Friday, she pulled in the big box television that usually meant that the teacher was going to put on a movie and do something else. I always interpreted it as surprise nap time while Mel took notes, but I didn't have that this class, so I paid attention. The movie was pretty boring. The names of species kept tripping me up. I'm pretty sure I spelled most of them wrong. I did find something interesting though, the idea of puddling. When butterflies need food, but for whatever reason it is hard to come by, they land in something moist and draw nutrients and water from it. It can be mud or sitting pool water or even blood. That blood thing stuck with me. The following class was art, and Mrs. Gardner didn't seem to appreciate my oil pastel picture. I had made a scene of a kaleidoscope of butterflies, a phrase courtesy of the previous class, drinking the blood of some poor slain creature, and I got detention in the last class of the day on a Friday. I was the only kid in detention that day, so I guess the teacher took pity on me and sent me home after only half the usual time. I gave her a quick thanks, packed up my stuff, and got out of that classroom as fast as I could. I'm sure if I'd been paying attention, I wouldn't have tripped over the pair of skinny legs that were sticking out in the middle of the hallway. I fell hard on my hands and knees. "I'm so sorry," Mel said, helping me up. "I wanted to surprise you." I immediately forgot any sadness or anger I felt towards her and hugged her as if she was going to fly away again. I hadn't realized that I actually missed her that much until I saw her. Lonely and bored, sure, but actually legitimately missing her. It was a new concept. We walked my bike home that day. It took the whole walk to catch Mel up on what had happened at school. Who was going to the rich neighbourhoods for trick-or-treating, who was going out with who, and what two girls got mad at each other because they learned that they had gotten the same costume. Mel seemed distracted, which reminded me about why she had gone in the first place. "Oh, did your aunt die?" she said. I was kind of astounded. Just a few days ago, Mel couldn't keep herself together enough to talk about it. "Yeah, are you okay?" I said. "Yep, here she is," she said, pulling a large locket from under her shirt. "You mean she's in there?" I said, disgusted. "Well, her ashes are. They had her burned up." "Ah, okay. Well, are you still up for tomorrow?" I said, hoping to change the subject to anything but dead aunts stuffed into jewellery. Having never seen a dead body before, the idea freaked me out a ton. "Sure, but do you think we could do something special?" she said. She explained that she couldn't actually explain it. It was more of a see it to believe it type of thing, but she had a pretty meticulous plan already laid out. We wrap up our trick-or-treating by 7 o'clock, head over to my house for a sleepover, then sneak out by 11:45 and bike over to the treehouse just in time for midnight. After I had agreed, Mel went home instead of hanging out. She said that she needed to prepare for tomorrow. I remembered that my mum had said that people grieve in a lot of different ways and not to be upset if Mel was acting weird for a while, so I let it go and told her good night. That Halloween day was almost perfect. The weather was a decent 76 degrees, and every plan we had made seemed to fall right into place. My mum took a picture of us in our costumes. Mel looked like a lady we had seen selling tarot readings in New Orleans when our families vacationed there a few summers ago, and I was the bride of Frankenstein. I remember being so proud that I got hair to stand up that tall. In the end, only a few people got to see our costumes because it looked like everyone had decided to go to the rich neighbourhoods for trick-or-treating. Initially, we were a little disappointed when we saw the desolate streets, but neighbours were a little more generous with the candy. Since everyone was on the Atkins diet, no one wanted all that sugar in their house. We got to my house exactly on time and did our best to get all of the hairspray out and grease paint off. By 8 o'clock, we were in PJs with a bowl of popcorn, watching our favourite horror movie in the living room. It was perfect, and I felt so warm inside. My parents had been asleep for a while by the time 11:45 rolled around, so sneaking out wasn't an issue. Mel made sure to leave a chair outside of my window so we could get back in quickly if we got caught, and then hopped on my handlebars so we could get to her house as fast as we could. 7 minutes later, I parked the bike in an inconspicuous hiding place, and Mel practically sprinted through her backyard and into the trees. I followed her as fast as I could, but by the time I reached the top of the ladder, Mel was already settled into her spot. She was bouncing with excitement. There seemed to be a million candles, and Melanie had lit all of them, so the treehouse was bathed in a warm orange glow. The windows and floors were covered in some sort of light, coloured material, and she had painted weird symbols on all of the walls. There was a big circle around the sitting area made out of salt. I was really impressed. Then I saw the Ouija board in the middle of the room, surrounded by the little gifts her aunt had given her. My stomach dropped. I knew that Ouija boards were just a silly game and ghosts weren't real. I'd stopped getting scared of the monster under my bed years ago. But seeing everything Mel had set up and her overall anticipation about what she was planning made me very, very nervous. "Mel, what is this?" "We are going to contact my Aunt Ginger," she announced dramatically. I told her that some older kids around school were talking about the Ouija boards when she was away. They were saying that they tried to contact John F. Kennedy and Marie Antoinette, but the planchette never moved for them. "But they didn't have Auntie Ginger's ritual," she said as she pulled a piece of browned, weathered paper from out of her pocket. She handed it to me, and, as I looked over the scrawled, handwritten notes, said, "She left it for me in an envelope at her house. I think she wants me to talk to her in the afterlife." The ritual required specific foreign words to be chanted a specific number of times with a specific set of items that Mel already had. I didn't doubt Ginger had planned this as a last hurrah for her niece. "Okay, then, what first?" I asked. Mel pulled a giant knife from behind her back. "What are you doing?" I shouted, and I guess my subconscious kicked in because I found myself lowering my arms from a protective position with a giggling Mel in front of me. "The first ingredient is virgin blood. It says it right here." She used the knife to point at the paper. I figured that 2 virgins are better than 1. I gave her my hand reluctantly. She used the knife to slice a small cut into my finger and then her own. She let a couple drops of her blood drip into an ornate golden bowl. I followed suit. Mel continued with the other steps listed on the paper. She asked me to chant a phrase in Latin while she used each one of her gifts from her aunt as they were needed. A small bird skull was crushed and added to the bowl of blood. A ribbon was tied to each of our wrists, and a black stubby candle was lit and placed in the center of the bowl. She had a few amulets and crystals that she made gestures with, and wrapped a small, dead butterfly in a piece of red fabric. I remember thinking that none of these items were very hard to come by. You just had to wave them around and say some funny words and tell your best friend that you were doing dark magic. Then I thought that Mel was probably playing a prank on me. No way was any of this going to work, but she just wanted to scare me on Halloween night. I was angry, and every moment she continued on with this, I was getting angrier. I didn't know what else to do, so I just stopped chanting. "What are you doing?" Mel said. "This prank isn't very nice, Mel," I said, untying the ribbons from my wrists. "No, it's not a prank, I swear," she screamed at me, but I'd had enough. "I'm going home. I don't want to do this anymore." I stood up. "Please, Corinne, please don't. Let me finish first. Don't," she pleaded. But it was too late. I wish I had listened to her. I wish I had just sat back down and let her do whatever she wanted to do, even if it had been a dumb prank. But I didn't. I went to step out of the circle, but my foot disturbed the salt and separated the line. Mel screamed. I looked back at her and saw that she had her head and arms thrown back, mouth wide open. Her muscles strained and I could see the blue veins crawling up her throat. The planchette on the Ouija board moved. Mel spoke as it pointed to each letter. "H-E-L-L-O," she said. The voice that came from her mouth did not belong to her. It sounded like gravel, like deep, deep darkness. "Are you okay?" I stammered. The voice laughed and Mel brought her head down to look at me. In just those few moments, Mel didn't look like Mel anymore. Her eyes were bloodshot, her sunken cheeks made her look gaunt, and her lips were cracked and bleeding. She smiled at me. "I'm fine," the voice cooed. "Please, won't you sit with me?" "No, I don't like this game. Mel, please stop. You're really, really scaring me." "She's not here," it mocked. "Don't you know that, stupid girl?" The treehouse erupted in loud bangs. They seemed to be coming from everywhere, like 100 people were banging their fists against the walls. I covered my ears and cowered. Then it stopped. The thing wearing Mel's body laughed at me as it twitched and spasmed. "Where is she?" was the only thing I could think to say. I understood that this wasn't a prank anymore. It opened its mouth and a scream, the scream of a terrified 11-year-old girl, escaped. The planchette shot around the board, spelling out, "Help me," over and over again. "Help me, help me, help me, help me, help me, help me, help me," this thing said and barked out a laugh. I ran to the trapdoor and pulled it open, only to have it wrenched out of my grasp by some unseen force. It was pulled too hard and so suddenly that I didn't have time to let go, and I fell face first into a windowsill, the corner cutting my forehead open. I made myself get to my feet and look at it. Warm blood was running down the side of my face, but I was too scared to turn my back to it. It never blinked, but twisted Mel's face into an awful smile. "You provided me with a body and the gift of a soul." Its breath was heavy. "I want to thank you. Properly." It gestured to the spot where I had inadvertently broken the salt circle. "Please, come back inside," it said. The planchette flew to the no on the Ouija board, but the thing didn't notice or didn't care. Its glassy black eyes were trained on me. "No, I don't want to. I want you to bring Mel back," I demanded, "or I'll leave." "You wouldn't leave such a sweet, tender soul alone with me, would you?" The planchette spelled out, "Leave." The trapdoor flew open. The resounding bang made me jump, but I turned on my heel and started towards it. "I'll hurt her, or I'll eat her. The innocent ones are always so tender. I could even ruin her soul, make it dark, make it spiteful and gutless. Like you. It should have been you, you know." The phrase, "should have been you," struck me and I stopped. It was right. I should be the one whose soul was lost, not Mel's. "It should have been you," came the soft, sweet voice of Mel from behind me. I turned and saw her, no pale, sunken skin or black eyes, on her hands and knees. She looked so sad and helpless. I've never seen her like that before. It broke my heart. "Please, I can't go back. It should have been you." She held her hand out to me. "Come into the circle. Save me." I couldn't let her go back. I needed to help my best friend. I put my hand out and cautiously reached for hers. Tears were welling in her eyes, but as soon as I got close, her face contorted into something monstrous. It lunged at me, and I was able to pull myself away with only a shallow scratch across the inside of my wrist. But it burned. It felt like the sun was trying to break through my skin, like I was being burned from the inside. The monster crawled towards me. It didn't look like Mel anymore. It was a pale, pink humanoid figure. Its emaciated body should have been weak, but the muscles beneath its skin were lithe and strong. There was no competition between me and it. If it wanted me, it was going to take me, no matter how hard I fought it. I backed up, but there wasn't far to go in the small space, and my back quickly hit the wall. It stood and got very close, and I could feel the heat coming from inside its throat. It grabbed my face and used its sticky tongue to lick the blood on my face. It held my face near its mouth and opened it too wide to be natural. 1,000 pained screams came from inside. My hand searched around blindly for anything at all. The first thing I touched was a candle in a glass vase. I grabbed it and smashed it against the monster's head and ducked away into the salt circle, quickly closing it. To my horror, it had reverted back to Mel's visage. My friend's head was split open, and I could see bone. Blood poured over half of her face. It roared at me. I looked down. The planchette on the board was moving so fast I could barely read it. Burn it down. It meant the treehouse. The monster kept going back and forth between the pale figure and Mel as it stalked around the salt circle. I realized that I wasn't the one bound by the circle. It was. I knew what I had to do, and I knew what it meant. The planchette moved on to the word goodbye. I slowly placed a foot behind me, then another. The monster watched my feet, waiting for the moment I would step out. I kept going until I knew that I was close by the edge. I took a breath and dragged my foot, breaking the line of white that stood between me and death. It was so predictable. It moved toward me fast, but when it fully placed itself inside the circle, I pushed the salt back down with my foot and closed it again. It was trapped. Mel was trapped too. I grabbed the pieces of fabric Mel had used to decorate the place and set them on fire using the candles. The wood caught quickly, and I threw everything into it to fuel the fire. I refused to let myself look at the monster again when I climbed down the ladder. It had been calling to me using Mel's voice, and I knew it had taken on her pitiful form again. I didn't want to see my best friend among the flames. As I ran through Mel's backyard and to my bike, I could hear the creature's roar, and just under it, the sound of a little girl screaming. I got home and tended to my relatively slow wounds and waited in my bed. I didn't sleep. The next morning my mum cried as she told me that Mel had snuck out in the middle of the night. She said that no one knows what happened, but the police seem to think that she accidentally set a fire in the treehouse and then threw herself out of a window to save herself. She didn't survive the fall. I didn't cry. Couldn't cry. I felt numb. Later that evening, I rode to Mel's house after the news vans and police had left. I ignored the caution tape and stood under the remains of the treehouse. Mel's body had been moved, but no one bothered to clean up the puddle of blood that remained. There were butterflies in it, taking what was left of Mel's life for themselves. I still couldn't help but think it should have been me. As of this year, that was 20 years ago, and for 20 Halloweens, Mel has visited me, heralded by a kaleidoscope of butterflies. The first year I thought I had been losing my mind and asked my parents to take me to a doctor. When the vision was gone the following day, they said it had only been a grief-fueled hallucination. The second year was the same, and then the third. By the fourth year, I had learned to just shut myself in my room all Halloween night and wait until it stopped. On the seventh year, Mel's mum killed both of the twins. One drowned and one strangled. She then walked into the burned ruins of the treehouse and took a cocktail of rat poison, vodka, and a handful of pills. Mel's dad had a breakdown and has been in a long-term mental health facility. I think Mel visited her mum too. Mel tells me to do things like that. She comes to me, all bloodshot eyes and pointy-toothed smirk, and tells me to end my life to exchange it with hers. That I should be the one burning with the man, not her. My brain knows that's not really her. It's the creature wearing her face, which seems to be slowly melting as the years go by. My heart, on the other hand, can't seem to let go of the guilt of leaving her to die in that treehouse. I've consulted several characters in an attempt to understand what happened that night. They vary in degrees of reliability, but they all have pretty much come to the same conclusion. Mel would never have been able to leave that treehouse alive. We were kids, and whatever entity that had come when Mel called upon another realm was particularly aggressive. Some said that the only reason I was able to get out was because it just wants to toy with me until it can take me. This is its entertainment. There's a tapping on my window now. I don't want to look because I know what it is. I've locked myself in my office 16 floors up. There's only one thing that could possibly be out there. I know that, eventually, either curiosity or some sort of twisted nostalgia will make me look over to her, and she'll have her face pressed against the glass with that awful, evil smile stuck on her face. She'll whisper to me as butterflies ram themselves against the window and fall to the ground dead. I hope that I make it another 30 years, but I'll probably tire of this game faster than it does. No matter what happens, I know where I'll be when I die. I'll be with the creature that took my friend, burning from the inside out. I just want to thank janiebegood for allowing me to narrate this story. If you liked what you heard here, make sure you show the author some love. I'll leave a link for the original story in the description below. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, and as always, stay tuned for one more nightmare.